The wind whistled through the barn, carrying with it the scent of fresh hay and the weight of an impending decision. Amy stood there, motionless, as if the world had slowed down around her. Her gaze flickered from Ty to Nathan, and her heart thundered in her chest. The two men, her past and her future, stood before her, each representing a different life, a different dream. But now, with the tension thick in the air, it was time to make a choice that would shape everything. What do you do when your heart is torn into directions? Amy had spent months trying to ignore the inevitable, hoping that time would offer clarity, hoping the answer would appear as if by magic. But as the days turned into weeks, the confusion only deepened. Ty, her husband, had always been the constant in her life, the man who had been there when she needed him most. From the highs to the lows, they had built something together, something strong, something that had survived the test of time. But then Nathan came into the picture, a new possibility, a man who didn't carry the weight of the past, someone who had shown her a new kind of tenderness, a fresh perspective. His presence had brought something to Amy that she hadn't realized. She needed hope for something different. Amy wasn't the kind of person who made decisions lightly, and she had spent endless nights replaying the same questions in her head. Could she walk away from the life she had with Ty? Or had she found something with Nathan that she couldn't ignore? The farm had always been a place of stability, a place where things felt right, where the past and future could coexist. But now, standing in the middle of it all, it felt like the ground beneath her feet was shifting. Her heart wavered between two different paths. One was a familiar, comfortable road with Ty, and the other was uncertain, new, and full of possibilities with Nathan. Amy knew the decision she had to make wasn't just about love, it was about who she was, what she had become, and what she wanted her future to look like. Could she really walk away from Ty, from the life they had shared, from the family they had built together? Or would she take the leap with Nathan, knowing there were no guarantees? As she stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on her, she realized just how complicated love could be. Amy had always believed in the power of a second chance, in the idea that the heart could heal and grow. But could it love two people at once? The barn seemed quiet, and Amy couldn't escape the noise in her head. She had spent so much time weighing her feelings, but now the only thing she could focus on was the pounding of her heart, the need to make a decision. Time was running out. The longer she took, the harder it would be. She had to face the truth. Her eyes shifted to Ty, standing a few steps away, his presence comforting, stable. He looked at her with a gaze that knew her better than anyone. Ty had been there for her through everything, the loss of a loved one, the highs and lows of life on the farm. There was a history with Ty that couldn't be erased, a bond that had been forged through years of shared experiences. But the question was, had they both grown into the people they needed to be, together? And then there was Nathan. His smile was different. His touch was gentle, but it carried the promise of something new, something exciting. Amy felt a spark when she was with him, something she hadn't realized was missing in her life. But could she trust that spark? Could she build a future on the uncertainty of what they might become? Her heart clenched, torn between the two men. She couldn't have both. She knew that. But could she walk away from the life she had with Ty? Could she look into Nathan's eyes and tell him she wasn't ready to take that chance? For Amy, the decision was more than just about love. It was about the life she had carved for herself, the family she had built. It was about her future, about choosing the person who would stand by her side through everything that life might throw at her. But that was a choice she couldn't make lightly. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. The choice was hers, and there was no turning back. One way or another, someone would be hurt. But in the end, she knew she had to follow her heart, even if it meant making a choice that would change everything. Amy knew she had come to a crossroads, and now she had to choose which direction her heart would lead her. The stillness of the barn felt almost suffocating to Amy. Her hands rested on the cool wooden beam of the fence, her fingers tightening around it as though it could somehow ground her. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind, none of them offering a clear answer. She had tried for weeks to avoid this moment, but now that it was here, All the uncertainty she'd been holding back came flooding forward. Ty had always been her anchor. He was the one who knew her better than anyone else. They'd weathered the hardest storms together, from the tragic loss of a beloved family member to the quiet moments where they'd sat side by side, just being there for each other. They had built something that had been strong enough to survive the ups and downs. She looked over at Ty now, standing with his arms folded, his face calm but his eyes holding an intensity she knew all too well. They had so many memories, so many moments they had shared, from the first time they had met to the challenges they'd overcome together. And yet, standing there with him now, Amy couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Or maybe it wasn't missing. Maybe it was just changed. In the quiet of her mind, she asked herself, was it possible that after everything, they had both grown into different people? Had their connection shifted beyond recognition? She loved Ty. There was no question about that. But was love enough to hold them together now, in this moment, when everything felt so complicated? Her gaze shifted to Nathan, standing a few paces away. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, hope mixed with something else, something raw and vulnerable. When Nathan had come into her life, he hadn't just offered her a fresh start. He had reminded her of who she used to be. He made her feel like the world was full of possibilities again, that maybe life could be different, better, brighter. Nathan didn't carry the weight of years of history. He didn't have the shared memories that Ty did. And yet, there was a warmth in his presence, a sense of comfort that came from not being bound by the past. With Nathan, there were no expectations, no baggage, just a chance for something new, something unknown. His smile was different from Ty's, and yet it carried a sense of promise, of things yet to be explored. But was it enough? Could she trust it? Could she leave behind the life she had worked so hard to build with Ty for something that was still, at its core, a mystery? The truth was, Amy had never imagined herself in this position. She had always believed that love was simple, that it was meant to grow and evolve in one direction, not split into two, not pull her in opposing directions. But here she was, caught between two men, each offering her something she had longed for in different ways. Ty, her stability; Nathan, her excitement. Both of them had become an integral part of her life, and both of them made her feel something, made her feel alive. Amy's heart ached as she thought about it. She knew she couldn't string them both along. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, when inside, her soul was torn. The longer she waited, the more uncertain things would become. Her fear was growing, the fear that choosing one would destroy the other, that one of them would leave her life, perhaps never to return. She remembered the first time she had met Nathan, how he had stepped into her life at a time when everything felt fragile. He hadn't known her past, hadn't been there for the most painful moments, yet somehow, he had managed to make her feel seen, understood. His support had been unconditional, and for the first time in a long while, Amy had felt like she could breathe. But then there was Ty. He had been there through thick and thin, through all the fights and reconciliations. They had built something that felt unbreakable. But had it become routine? Had they stopped growing together? Or was this just a natural phase of their relationship, one that they could overcome with time and effort? Amy closed her eyes, feeling the wind brush against her skin. She had always been a fighter, but now, the battle felt different. It wasn't about fighting for her family, her future. It was about fighting for the part of herself that was still uncertain. The pressure was overwhelming. She wanted the easy answer, the clear path. She wanted to feel confident in her decision. But nothing about this felt easy. Amy had always believed that love was enough to overcome anything. But now, she wasn't so sure. Nathan was waiting, his eyes searching hers, hoping for the answer that Amy didn't yet have. Ty, on the other hand, stood silently, like a rock, the man who had always been steady in her life. Both of them were waiting for her to make the choice that would define not just her future, but the future of everyone around her. Amy couldn't help but wonder if she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. The barn was quiet. The hum of the world outside faded. into the background as Amy stood there, feeling as though the moment had stretched into eternity. Her heart was racing, the decision pulling at her like two forces fighting for her soul. Ty's steady presence had always been a comfort. He was calm, solid, the person who had been her partner in everything. Through the sleepless nights with the horses, through the heartache and the joy of building a family, he had been there, right beside her. His love had never wavered, and the life they had created together was something Amy cherished deeply. But something inside her had shifted, something she couldn't ignore. And then Nathan, his gentle smile, his unwavering support, his ability to make her feel like she was worth more than she had realized. He had brought light back into her life, showing her that it was possible to feel passion again, to hope for something new. She hadn't known she needed him until he had shown up, and now she wasn't sure how to navigate the space he had carved in her heart. But here she was. The decision was inevitable. It had been hanging over her like a dark cloud for far too long, and Amy knew that if she didn't make it now, it would destroy her. She couldn't keep going back and forth, unsure of what her heart truly wanted. The time had come to choose. Ty's eyes met hers, and for a split second, Amy felt a pang of guilt. She had built a life with him, a life she had never taken for granted, but the bond they shared had evolved. It had grown in ways she didn't expect, but so had she. Ty had been her everything, her rock. But sometimes rocks didn't move, and she felt as though she needed to move now, to explore the world in a different way. The air in the barn was heavy with emotion, and as Amy looked at Ty, she saw the man she had always known, the man who had held her through every storm, the man who understood her in ways that no one else could. The memories they had shared flashed through her mind in a blur of emotion. Their first kiss, their wedding, the quiet moments they had spent together just enjoying each other's company. And yet, as she stood there, she realized something. Ty was her past, and Nathan was her present. Her feelings for Nathan had awakened something in her that she had buried for years. He had helped her rediscover parts of herself that she thought she had lost. She didn't know what the future would hold with him, but in that moment, she knew that she couldn't walk away from the possibility of what they could become. But the truth was, it wasn't just about Nathan or Ty. It was about Amy, the woman she had become over the years. Could she live with the choice she made? Could she live with the path that was about to unfold? Tears welled in her eyes as she turned to Nathan. His expression softened, his lips pressed together as if bracing for the inevitable. He had been so patient, so understanding, but Amy knew the truth. She knew that no matter how much she cared for Nathan, her heart still belonged to Ty. The words that came out of her mouth were soft, almost a whisper, but they carried the weight of everything she had been carrying for months. Ty, she said, her voice trembling, I choose you. The words felt both freeing and devastating. Amy's heart clenched as she saw the flicker of pain cross Nathan's face. He nodded slowly, his jaw tight, but he said nothing. He had known all along that the choice would be difficult, that Amy's past with Ty would always have a claim on her heart. As she turned to Ty, her gaze met his, and in that moment, everything else faded away. The uncertainty, the guilt, the doubt, they were all gone. The love between them wasn't perfect. It never had been, but it was real. It had withstood the test of time and hardship, and for all the things that had changed, that was something that could never be erased. Ty's eyes softened, and a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Without saying a word, he took a step toward her, his arms opening to welcome her back into the life they had built together. In that moment, Amy felt the tension drain from her shoulders. The decision had been made, and as difficult as it had been, it felt like the right one. Nathan had given her something valuable, a chance to remember what it was like to feel truly alive, to experience a new kind of love. But Ty had always been the one who understood her, the one who had been by her side through everything. And now, with one choice, Amy realized that the future she had longed for wasn't as far away as she had thought. It had always been with Ty. As Amy stepped into Ty's arms, the world around them seemed to settle. She knew there would be bumps along the way, challenges ahead, but in that moment, Amy had found her place again. She had chosen the man who would walk beside her for whatever came next, and yet, as she embraced him, a new realization dawned on her. While Amy's choice had been made, someone else's life was about to change as well. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across Heartland. The animals stirred lazily in their pens, the sounds of the farm a familiar comfort. Yet, despite the peaceful surroundings, Lou felt a ripple of uncertainty in her heart. The past months had been full of shifts, changes that had tested her in ways she hadn't expected. Amy's decision, though emotional, was only part of the storm. There was something else brewing just beneath the surface, something that Lou knew was about to come to light. For years, Lou had been the one who held the family together. She was the planner, the organizer, the voice of reason in a whirlwind of emotions. But beneath her practical exterior, there had always been a longing for something more, something that was entirely her own. Through the trials of the past, the pressures of running Heartland, and the balancing act of family life, Lou had been focused on everyone else. But now, with Amy's decision made and the tension beginning to settle, Lou found herself standing at a crossroads of her own. She thought back to the quiet conversations, the unexpected moments when she had felt a spark with someone. At first, she hadn't noticed it. It was just another one of those moments slipping through her fingers like sand. But over time, the spark had grown into something more tangible, something that had slowly, but surely, pulled her toward a new path. A path she hadn't expected to be on. Lou had always been fiercely independent, but there was a part of her that had longed for a connection, a partnership that wasn't tied to the weight of responsibility. That's when she met him. His name was Caleb. He had arrived in Heartland a few months ago, an outsider, but one who had proven himself through hard work and a quiet strength that resonated with Lou. He was different from the men she had known before, not because he had something to prove, but because he didn't need to prove anything at all. His sincerity was disarming, and as the weeks passed, Lou found herself looking forward to the moments they shared. At first, Lou tried to brush it off. She had enough on her plate, she didn't need a complicated romance to add to the mix. But Caleb had a way of being there when she needed him most, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to fill a space in her heart that she hadn't realized was empty, but she hadn't been ready to admit it to herself. She hadn't wanted to acknowledge how deeply she had fallen for him. It was easier to focus on work, on the kids, on the ranch, but the truth was, every time she saw Caleb, a part of her heart fluttered. There was a joy in his presence that she hadn't felt in a long time. He made her feel seen, valued not just as a sister, a mother, a businesswoman, but as Lou, a woman worthy of love and happiness. The moment of revelation came one evening, when they had shared a quiet dinner together, their conversation flowing easily, filled with laughter and comfort. It was in that moment that Lou realized she couldn't hide from her feelings any longer. Caleb had slipped into her heart without her even noticing, and when he looked at her with those eyes that always seemed to understand, she knew this was something real. But Lou, being Lou, couldn't help but question it. She had been hurt before, and the fear of vulnerability still lingered in the corners of her mind. Was she truly ready to open up her heart again? Could she trust Caleb enough to take that leap? As she stood in the kitchen the next morning, watching the steam rise from her coffee cup, Lou found herself at a crossroads of her own. Amy's choice had been made, and the path ahead for both sisters seemed clearer now. Yet, in Lou's heart, there was a question still lingering. Should she take the leap with Caleb? Could she allow herself to love again, to take a chance on a future with him? It was a quiet Saturday morning, and as Lou stood by the window, gazing out at the farm, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. Her life had been full of unexpected turns, and yet, this one felt different. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew that her heart was ready to take a risk. With Caleb, she had found something that wasn't about the past or the future, it was about now. About living fully in the present, embracing love without hesitation. Lou wasn't sure what would come next, but for the first time in a long while, she was okay with the uncertainty. The decision was hers to make, and as she looked out over the land that had been home for so long, she knew that her own future, was just beginning. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden glow over Heartland. The fields, the barn, and the distant mountains stood quietly, as though the land itself was waiting for the next chapter to unfold. It was a peaceful evening, yet everything felt different. The weight of Amy's choice had settled, and with it, a new kind of peace had arrived. But while one chapter was closing, another was opening, both for Amy and for Lou. Amy stood on the porch, her eyes looking out over the land she had always known, her heart still processing the decision she had made. Choosing Ty had been one of the hardest things she had ever done. There was a bittersweet feeling that lingered in her chest, but in the quiet of the evening, Amy knew it had been the right choice. She had chosen the past, yes, but in doing so, she had embraced her future. She and Ty would face the future together, whatever it may bring. The love they had shared would carry them forward, even as the world around them continued to change. She glanced over at Ty, who stood beside her, his hand resting gently on the railing. His presence, calm and steady, was the anchor she needed, and for the first time in a long while, Amy felt a sense of certainty. They were a family stronger than ever, and despite the pain of her decision, she realized that some choices, though difficult, were what set the foundation for the life they had ahead of them. Lou, too, stood by the window, looking out at the same setting sun. A new feeling stirred inside her, one she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It was strange, this feeling of being on the verge of something new, something that wasn't just about the farm or the family or the past. This was about Lou, the woman who had held everything together for so long but had never truly allowed herself to embrace love for what it could be. Caleb had changed that. He had given her a chance to explore the side of herself she had long kept hidden away. Her heart was no longer clouded by doubt. She had made a decision too, though it hadn't been as obvious as Amy's. Lou was taking a chance, allowing herself the possibility of a new love. Caleb's presence had transformed her life in subtle ways, and now she was ready to embrace that fully. As the evening shadows lengthened, Lou found herself filled with a quiet kind of strength. She didn't know where her journey with Caleb would lead, but she was no longer afraid to find out. With the decision made, Amy and Lou knew that they could face whatever the future held together, but on their own separate paths. They had always been close, but now they were even more so. The love they shared as sisters was unbreakable, and the journey they would take together, each with their own heartache and triumphs, would only make them stronger. As the night drew in, the familiar sounds of the farm continued: horses whinnying in the distance, the rustling of trees in the gentle wind. Heartland was as it always had been, a place where life moved at its own pace, where the land and its people shaped each other. And yet, tonight, everything felt new. For Amy, it was about rekindling her past and embracing the love she had with Ty. For Lou, it was about taking a risk, stepping into the unknown with Caleb. Heartland had always been a place where things changed, sometimes slowly, sometimes in dramatic ways. But tonight, the winds of change felt different. They were softer, quieter, but no less significant. Amy had made her choice, Lou had made hers, and in doing so, both had begun to carve out a new future for themselves. As the stars began to appear, twinkling above the ranch, the future seemed bright. There would be challenges, no doubt. There would be heartache, growth, and moments of uncertainty. But there would also be love, stronger, deeper, and more present than ever before. And for the first time in a long while, both Amy and Lou could look ahead without fear, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together, in their own ways, with hearts open to whatever came next.